Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Working with our colleagues at Morgan Lewis, the US-UAE Business Council is pleased to bring you this fifth edition of Doing Business in the UAE. We update and publish this how-to guide for successfully navigating policy, law, and practice in the United Arab Emirates each year in hopes of demystifying and clarifying changes to the business environment. In this hyperactive period with incredibly ambitious goals and objectives being set in the UAE, our member companies need every available leg up and insight. Our partner, Morgan Lewis, one of the world's top US law firms, does just that every day by helping their clients connect the dots in ways that few others can do. With that, let's jump in for a quick overview of this new 2023 guide. And let me introduce the Morgan Lewis team. We have Mark Gilligan, Bill Nash, and Sara Aranjo. Great to have you all here today. So, Mark, from a policy perspective, what are the main highlights and updates covered in the 2023 business guide, and how do they impact companies doing business in the UAE today?
One thing has really struck me in terms of this updated version. It's that the advancements and progression that we've seen across so many varying industries, both law, policy, and also general advancements in terms of quality of life and the progressions that are being made by the government across the board. We've seen a lot of change in both government consolidation in Abu Dhabi with leadership. We've also seen a lot of changes across corporate taxation, which I think others in this call may talk to better than me. A bringing into to line with global best practice is a lot of what we touch upon in the report. You've got things like data protection.
Data protection and privacy is a major theme in this year's report, and it will be a key issue that's going to be advanced, if you will, even further in 2024 as well. What are the key changes and updates in the past year with regards to digital law, policies, and regulations, and what can we expect moving forward?
Historically, the UAE has had a rather limited data protection law. It's been set out across various different pieces of legislation, and what we've now seen is a bringing together of all of the different pieces of legislation into a single data protection and policy law, and equally the addition of best practice to comply with what we see in Europe. Europe has what we call the GDPR, which is essentially being put out now globally to various different countries, and the UAE is coming into line with that to ensure that as a matter of data processing, data transfer across jurisdictions for multinational organizations, the UAE is now best in class and is bringing itself in line with what's going on in Europe, US, and elsewhere. It's something that's developing. We've seen the initiation of those regulations. They came out within the last year, but there's an awful lot of additional work to be done on them, a lot of implementing regulations that are being worked on at the moment. But in essence, what these regulations are going to do is to facilitate the transfer of data in a manner which is both accustomed to businesses in other jurisdictions, but equally allows you to do it in a very efficient and a best in class way.
And that's exactly what the Emiratis have wanted to do when they've coordinated and brought our industries and our companies in to help consult with them before they've enacted these laws. They're also establishing a new UAE data office, if you will, at the federal level. Hopefully this is all going to help with coordination of different interpretations of laws among the Emirates. Can you just give us a comment or two before we move on to Bill about that?
The data office is going to oversee the UAE wide implementation and the operation and organization of data processing across the seven different Emirates. And obviously, it's also going to play in, Danny, with the various free zones that we have, and particularly the DIFC in Dubai and the ADGM in Abu Dhabi. Now, both of those free zones, they have their own separate data processing regulations, which very closely mirror what I referred to earlier as exists in Europe, the GDPR. And so the data office is going to serve as I suppose, a conduit for all data processing information. Everybody is going to feed into that. And as with many other businesses and many other government arrangements that we're seeing and advancements that we're seeing, it is an effort to streamline and consolidate into a single office many functions that previously were disparate and therefore in some ways not as efficient as they could have been. And so the data office is an example of these efficiencies that we're seeing and this coordination that we're seeing at a federal level, whereby you're getting a much better result, a much more I suppose coordinated result, and hopefully the data office as it gets up and running is gonna make the sharing of data much more efficient across the UAE, and that can only be a significant benefit and driver for business, both into and outbound from the UAE.
Let's turn to Bill, and I want to talk, Bill, a little bit about the new corporate tax system. Now, again, in an area of best practice, most folks would think that having a corporate tax is not the best thing in the world, but in fact, corporate tax is considered a marker in global best practices of a gold standard of a great way to run your economy and regulate your business. So, how does the UAE's new corporate tax system? How did it come into effect in the past year? What's been the impact on business? And if you could, any common issues or problems that companies are facing in implementing the new corporate tax, and any tips that you have in that regard to help them, please.
So the corporate tax is, as you said, it's certainly not a new concept for most U.S. companies or international businesses, but it is new in the UAE. The system imposes a 9% business tax on annual taxable profits, still a quite competitive tax rate at 9% compared to most other global jurisdictions. There is a small business threshold, and there are a number of exemptions that apply, including for a number of the UAE free zone companies. Importantly, the law went into effect for financial years starting after June 1st, 2023. So it's important for companies, particularly those on a fiscal year calendar basis, that they understand that this corporate tax will apply to them on January 1st, 2024. So that's the first thing that folks need to focus on. And what we're seeing in the market, businesses really are actively preparing to implement the systems, evaluating the exemptions, trying to ensure that their internal systems are updated and that they can, for example, track expenses and deductions. Such internal accounting systems are very common for U.S. companies. They're not for historic UAE companies, but the law's been on the books now for a while, and everyone's had an opportunity to sort of adjust and get ready for it to come in. So we are seeing a few things in the market as people are getting ready for the implementation of the corporate tax. The first is just starting early enough, and hopefully most companies have started already. But if they haven't, they really should get started. The key is to understand the exemptions and to understand where an individual business is affected by the corporate tax. And the one key aspect of that is even if ultimately a company has a 0% tax obligation, which may apply, for example, if there's an exemption because of free zone business or whatnot, there still is a requirement to register with the tax authority. So that's something that folks need to keep in mind. They should be looking into this. If they think they're exempt, they still may need to register.
The FATF gray list is another issue that's been bubbling along here for the last year and a half. There's a final review or consultation, if you will, in the first quarter of 2024. This is something that the UAE government has given an incredible amount of effort into getting right over the last year. What's your, just real quick, what's your thought on whether they'll come off the gray list or not this first quarter?
I honestly, looking in my somewhat fuzzy crystal ball, I do think the UAE has a very good opportunity to come off the gray list for exactly the reason that you mentioned. The UAE government has taken the issue very seriously and has worked very hard to address FATF's concerns through both updated legislation and enforcement measures. The legislation really we saw come into effect in 2021, and at that point, the UAE adopted guidelines for financial institutions, for certain non-financial businesses, for professions such as accounting firms and law firms and whatnot. They also introduced several risk assessment reports related to anti-money laundering and to terrorist financing to create the framework of compliance. What we've seen in the last 2 years is, since the introduction of those measures, is much more rigorous compliance measures, and really, I would say the kind of the creation of more of a culture of compliance around anti-money laundering, know your customer issues. We have several clients of ours that have been subject to sort of routine anti-money laundering audits, whether through banking situations or through their free zone affiliations. And so the market knows that the UAE is serious about this. And as I said, I think FATF is aware of all of these steps the UAE has taken. So we're all waiting for the next step in the process, which will be in the spring of 24.
Before I turn to Sarah Bill, just what any other policy developments that you see in the year ahead that folks should think about? Are we anticipating any new significant laws in key areas that will affect business in 2024?
One thing you can always count on in the UAE is they don't sit still. So they're always looking at opportunities to modify, whether through policy declarations or specific legislative and legal changes. So Mark mentioned the UAE Data Office and data protection. That will, as he said, be a critical area of focus. We expect further relaxation in some of the corporate ownership restrictions that had applied historically. This, in my view, will just continue to enhance the UAE's reputation as a place, a regional location where international businesses can both form and can operate on a regional basis. We've also, and this is covered quite extensively in the new business guide, covered the new digital asset regulations, both at the federal level and at the emirate level, that have come into effect. We do expect further development in that space as well, as the UAE has become really a global hub in the digital asset space. And then finally, I'd mention further growth and developments in the capital markets. The activity on the UAE exchanges, both in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, has grown rapidly over the last few years. And as that occurs and as that activity continues to increase, we do expect that both the capital markets infrastructure and the rules and regulations around that will also continue to mature. So a lot of movement in that area as well.
Outstanding, outstanding, and just a plethora of new IPOs coming as well, I think, in 2024. Sarah, so resolution, if you will, is probably an area that your practice group is expert on, and you are able to provide a lot of value to the customer. What's new in the framework in the UAE in this regard?
The variety of the legal systems that are offered, particularly at the onshore court level, which is supplemented as well by English speaking courts sitting within the ADGM and the DIFC, have led to an extensive offering on the dispute resolution front to businesses operating in this part of the world. And we have seen very recently, particularly as a result of COVID, a push towards more digitalization. So the ADGM courts have adopted a purely unique digital approach with the manner in which they administer the cases, but also provided the first ever digital courtroom worldwide. The DIFC courts as well have equally added to its technology and construction division a new full-fledged digital economy court division. And the onshore courts, which are both at the federal and local emirates level, also have been providing remote hearings as well. And we have seen, in terms of recent noteworthy developments, um, amendments to also procedural laws, which have introduced streamlined processes, on one hand, for the enforcement of foreign arbitral awards in the UAE, both in terms of costs and time efficiency, but also on the other hand, there has been also recently the introduction of a payment order procedure, which has been extremely well received by the business community, as it has streamlined once again the enforcement of debts and credits in circulation at the business level. And actually, last month, last October, there has been an announcement made that there will be an Abu Dhabi English language notary service office created, which will come into operation in the coming months. And really, the purpose of the center is once again is to open up the judicial system and to make it more accessible to the international and English-speaking, particularly business community. And this is going to help broaden access to very much key legal services such as authenticating document contracts, particularly for non-Arabic speakers. And this pretty much follows the recent changes that we've touched upon during our discussion now, and including a couple of years ago in December 21, there was the announcement of a family court particularly dedicated to non-Muslims, which opened in Abu Dhabi as part of the efforts globally within the Emirate to advance the judicial framework here in the UAE.
This is just excellent. But so the UAE's federal arbitration law then sort of a corollary to that was amended in 2023, in September of 2023. How do you expect these amendments to impact the future of arbitration in the UAE?
Once again, the UAE has been very rich at this front because typically in a country, for example, like you will find in the US, you have one federal statute relating to arbitration. In the UAE, you actually have three. And we have the federal arbitration law, which was introduced in 2018. We also have the DIFC arbitration law and the ADGM arbitration regulations. And in September, the federal arbitration law of 2018 has been amended, and the amendments, which come in after 5 years, are very much welcome and relate primarily to matters pertaining to the requirements for arbitrators. So there has been an enhancement to the requirements for arbitrators to act in UAE seated proceedings, as well as changes pertaining to inviting arbitral institutions. And those changes also follow a broadening in scope of disputes which can be now referred to arbitration. And we've seen in the past few months an amendment which has rendered commercial agency disputes arbitrable. And this is really unprecedented, not only in the UAE, but in the Gulf region.
Once again, I'd just like to encourage anyone listening, anyone reading, to take a look at our new 2023 business guide. Again, friends, colleagues at Morgan Lewis, thanks so much for being here today. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful afternoon.